Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date. My name is Erich Kurschat. I am the owner of Harmony Insights, LLC, a company that allows me to work with organizations and consultants using the DISC personality assessment. And a lot of companies are using DISC virtually now to engage and develop their teams. That's all at harmonyinsights.com. And I'm also the founder of HR Hot Seat, an inclusive mastermind community of over 2,500 members at this point in 10 different licensed chapters around the country. So we serve HR professionals and those who are helping HR professionals. You can find out more about that at hrhotseat.com. Free to attend, free to register, and it all starts with registering a free profile at hrhotseat.com. Today, you are here for Harmony Insights lunch date. And the way that I tell this is a couple of weeks ago, with everything going on in the world, I said, I want to take 30 minutes out of my lunchtime, which is why it's called a lunch chat. Is that what I call it? Lunch date.
Lunch date.
To connect with colleagues, friends, anybody who inspires me personally. So it's kind of selfish in that way, but I wanted to invite others into this conversation. And today's guest, David Loiselle, is certainly one of those people who inspires me. David, welcome to the lunch date. The topic you have chosen is proactive HR leadership. Does your company have it? Before we dive into that, we are all impacted in some way by coronavirus right now. A lot of people working from home. A lot of people know people who have been impacted in other ways. If you're willing to share just briefly, what is one way that you have been personally impacted by COVID-19?
Yeah, there's no doubt everyone has been. Eric, thanks for having me. I think these lunch dates you're doing are great. The folks that you've had on so far have been super inspiring, and just kind of connecting people who are out there right now, finding their way in the new world, I think is important. So thank you for doing that. I think everyone appreciates it. For me, I'd say one of the biggest things is trying to get through each and every day and give towards and inspire a 2-year-old daughter. So I have one child only. She's 2 years old. She has been over the past year or so in full-time daycare. They call it school. She's learning a lot more there than she probably is here. And that's the big challenge is recognizing that we're all put into an environment that's different than it was 2 months ago. Some of that is work, some of that is family, some of that is how hobbies happen as summer's approaching, hobbies are being mixed up. But every day I want to make sure that my daughter, who really is a sponge now, it's crazy how quickly she's learning, doing the right to engage her. And I feel really bad that she has been friendless for 2 months because she's just such a fun social child and loves to run around and play with children. And so that's something that's hard for me, but we're doing our best, and we're networking with other children's families as much as possible so that when we do come out of this, we can plop her in groups of other kids and teachers and help her continue to learn and grow and be a dynamic little spunky thing that she is.
Well, how fantastic you get that quality time in the meantime. You know,
A lot
you're
of
probably
it.
getting to
A
see
lot of it.
so much more of her. Yeah, right.
For sure. It's great though. It's fantastic.
You and I, thank you for sharing that. You and I initially met when we worked together at Levy Restaurants in the home office here in Chicago for, I think it was 8 years total, maybe, that you and I worked together, if I remember correctly,
Yep.
but quite a while. Those who have been through any of my DISC workshops have heard at least one or two stories that feature you.
Oh, nice.
In all good ways.
Good stories, I'm sure. Yes,
Good
I
stories.
recall.
But you have gone on to do some pretty incredible things in the meantime, work with some great organizations. The way I've been asking this is, well, what is it about you, David Loiselle, that, given your background, what you bring to this conversation, positions you well to talk on the topic of proactive HR leadership?
You know what? I'm glad you asked the question, because I'll tell you quickly about my journey, and it was easy. I worked in the first half of my career, if not more, in a variety of management and HR and talent roles, mostly for large organizations, publicly traded companies, Four Seasons hotels, Levy restaurants. And then over the past 5 or 6 years, I pivoted quite a bit and started working with smaller or mid-sized, mostly in the technology space, tech firms. And one thing I learned throughout that journey is that the work that HR professionals have to do every day is not the same in each business, in each industry, in each time. Consider timing today versus timing yesterday. And to begin to spend time thinking about the future, and that is the short, midterm, and long-term future, and how you can impact the people that you work with, the careers of people in your organization, and ultimately the success of your organization is an area I have spent the past 5 years focused on. And now in the work that I do in consulting and advising small to mid-sized businesses, it's all about that. We set up talent roadmaps in order to help them invest in their people in the right way at the right time to support their business. So rarely do I do work that is about fixing current immediate problems or duct tape type work, but more about looking towards the future and making sure that you're aligning your people business with your business.
I love that. And I'll give you further props in this along the lines of you. I know you as somebody who, there are a number of people who talk about leadership. Number one, who have never been in a leadership role, two, have quite a bit of work to do themselves, which we all do. What I like about what you bring to this conversation is that you've been on the corporate side of things, you've been
Hmm.
on the operations side of things,
Hmm.
you've been solely focused on the learning and development function at one point.
Hmm.
You've worked for, billion dollar, 30,000 employee companies. You've worked with, startups that don't have a full-blown HR department. So you have
Yeah.
really not only experienced leadership at all levels, but you've seen it grow from a fledgling discipline all the way through uh, a really robust sort of global department. And
Yeah.
that
I'm lucky.
perspective, I think, is so valuable for this conversation.
Great, good. Yeah, I'm lucky to have been able to. I mean, lucky I made a little bit of a path for myself at some points, but to be able to experience a really broad spectrum of how the HR function can support a business, and back to my point, it can be very, very different, but it's why you really need to be able to know the business, know the people within the business, understand best practices that even outside of your four walls, and begin to look to the future to support the greater purpose of the business versus just kind of fighting fires today.
So right off the bat, I would love to define what we're talking about. And sometimes I'm hesitant to define things because everybody might bring their own definition. For example, to leadership, people may define it in different ways. If you wouldn't mind, let's start at least talking about what we're talking about when we say the word HR. So we'll get to
Ah,
leadership, but some
great.
people think of HR as being very specific and very niche and a very sort of tight, tightly defined group of people. I feel like, given what I know of you and your involvement in the community, that you would agree that HR is so broadly defined. So
Hmm.
when we are talking about HR leadership, what discipline are we really discussing?
Yeah, for me, I tend to spend most of my time looking at the way the people function of an organization can impact three major areas. There are other things that people in HR profession need to support, things like payroll and policy writing and some key blocking and tackling. I mostly am not talking about that, especially when it comes to leadership. I'm talking about three key disciplines kind of that fall under the umbrella of that around talent acquisition, talent development, and talent engagement. I consider that mostly the employee life cycle outside of the administrative function of human
Okay.
resources.
All right. That's really helpful. So as we dive into this, then, especially now with everything that's going on with COVID-19, can you speak to some of the challenges that you feel our attendees today may be facing individually or as an organization with regard to whether or not their HR leadership, they would deem them to be proactive in any way? And actually, to tee this conversation up, if this works, I've put together a quick poll that I'm going to launch here, and it's
Nice.
anonymous. I would welcome people's responses saying, do you feel that your company demonstrates proactive HR leadership? Yes, they do a fantastic job. There's probably some room for improvement. No, we're too busy reacting to the fire of the day. Or my favorite part, we have the best HR ever. It's me. And some of you may be in an HR role yourself, so you can continue responding to that as we go. But what I'm trying to highlight there is, I would imagine the majority of us see room for improvement. What are some of the specific challenges you think people are facing today, David, around whether or not their HR function is able to be proactive?
Yeah, and I want to give a little context and not spend too much time around the COVID crisis. but to understand kind of the perspective of proactive leadership in human resources versus either reactive or the famous statement, well, we've always done it that way. If you look back, only 6 to 8 weeks ago, we had the lowest unemployment in 50 years. So unemployment hasn't been as low as 3.5% since 1969. And for 5 years, it's been under 5%. And so that created, at least for 5 or 10 years, a fairly focused approach to those big disciplines: talent acquisition, talent development, and talent engagement. In talent acquisition, there was a lot of time being spent on that war on talent. How do you attract the best candidate? How do you build out your talent acquisition strategies and your brand? And that's where a focus was placed. Makes sense. For a long time, that's where the focus was. Around talent development, I found a lot of organizations really looking towards upskilling. So bringing on maybe lower experienced individuals, upskilling them in their role, and building career paths through training and development. On top of that, maybe a lot of manager development for first-time managers. And then around the talent engagement part, a big focus was on culture and perks. So you always hear people focusing on the need for culture and the need for providing the right benefits and perks around engagement to have people want to have long careers with an organization. I think those areas are focus areas that will always be important, but are certainly not a priority today as we kind of live in this area of crisis. And they very well might not be the exact area of priority tomorrow. And that's something I think everyone needs to be ready to focus on. So if you talk about crisis mode today, especially where HR professionals are spending their time, many of them, especially if you're still with an organization, are probably busier than you've ever been. And I'm sure there's people on this call who are shaking their head. They're hyper focused on creating consistent crisis communications, helping teams figure out how to work more effectively remote, doing some workforce optimization, the layoffs and furloughs that come along with that. I'm sure many people are researching and looking at safety protocols for people in the workforce as they may either be coming back in or already working within their four walls. And then a lot of HR people are just spending time figuring out the new regulations around sick time and FMLA and unemployment and all of those things that are completely due. So to spend time in crisis mode right now makes sense, and I understand why people need to, but I caution you at getting caught in crisis mode or fighting fires, even if that's kind of how you spent time or your company spent time focusing on HR initiatives in the past, because now more than ever, looking forward and beginning to understand what might be different in order to be successful is going to be a key.
Yeah.
And I have lots of specific thoughts on how we can look forward, but I'll let you chime in.
Right. No, I love that. And it strikes me suddenly that, we've been using the word leadership, but would you agree that we're really talking about anybody? Anybody has the capacity to lead in whatever HR role they happen to be in. So are we necessarily talking about the highest levels
Mm-mm.
of the organization, or is it really each of us to some extent?
Yeah, I think I consider the architecture of an HR team, whether it be one person, which many of us are, or it is a team of, I'm trying to think, my largest team at one point, like 35, people, running a large organization. Every single person has to be able to think like a business owner and think like a leader. You've heard a lot of people talk about that, but what does that mean, right? That means probably not just doing the job that's on paper or that is being instructed to you each and every day, but to start to look forward and say, what else can I do to make this HR function stronger? And I think it starts with just beginning to read the tea leaves. I think we often spend time fighting fires, as we mentioned, but if you have a finger on the pulse of what's happening within your team, within your business, and even outside of that, within your industry, and then outside of that industry, you'll start to understand what challenges might be coming down the road. Crisis, pandemic, not even worried about that, but other things might be down the road that if you get ahead of, they're a lot easier to lead through the change than if you're reacting to it once it's put on your plate.
I love that. And you know me to be a big disc nerd. Most people know me to be a, a disc nerd. And I've mentioned this on previous lunch dates, but disc, everything disc defines the work of leaders as crafting a vision, aligning
Mhm,
people with that vision, and then executing on it, which is
mhm.
something that we can all do. We don't have to be at the highest levels of our organization to be doing those things. And it sounds like that when we are in times of crisis, as we are now, we default to resort back to whatever styles are most natural to us, and we might be in firefighting mode. And there's certain things that just by nature we have to attend to,
Yeah,
right? That we can't skip that process. But it sounds like what you're
absolutely.
suggesting is once you feel that you have a handle on those things, that you have a sense of control, maybe that you didn't feel that you had previously, you'd be misguided if some portion of um, your effort and your focus isn't on, okay, what do we now do going forward so that we are better prepared next time for if something like this were to come back.
Yeah, can I give you some examples that are probably
Please, yeah.
practical to use today? And so, right now, we may all be spending a lot of time, again, doing the crisis management. But there are some simple things that I think everyone within any HR function can do to begin looking towards tomorrow and even begin executing, even if that execution is just planning, right? It could be setting up a roadmap for what you need to do to get from A to B to C to D. It could be beginning to research options for reaching future objectives. But I'll give some very specific examples. I think right now the HR and talent professionals need to step up and be ready to lead that change. And the way to do that is to have more information. So I would recommend that if you aren't really absorbing information on what's happening in your industry or outside of your industry, if you're looking to pivot to a different industry, start researching that. And that specific meaning around this crisis, what is the size of the impact to your organization or to your industry, even better yet, meaning hospitality business most likely more strongly hit than, say, the consumer packaged good business or grocery stores. We know grocery stores are, I don't want to call them thriving, but they're continuing to have a lot of business. They're considered an essential service. And although the way their business may change in the future, they have a business. So if you're in
Mhm.
hospitality, you may be more impacted in that. What opportunities are going to come out of this? So where will your industry begin to shift how you get customers and how you get clients and how you employ people 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, 18 months down the road? What ultimately might your industry look like down the road? Can you hear a screaming child?
I wasn't going to say anything about it.
Oh, I can. So if I'm slightly distracted, I apologize. But one is know your industry. Two, really understand what your company's objectives are 12 to 24 months out now, because I guarantee in almost every business, your company's business objectives are very different moving forward than they were a year ago. And you have to be really connected to those business objectives. No matter what your role is, understand what you're trying to achieve related to growth, revenue, customer retention, product offerings. Really know what it's going to look like 12 to 24 months out, because without that, you can't operate uh, proactively. The third thing is really taking stock of critical employees and building retention strategies around them. So identify what those critical employees or positions are to achieving those 12 to 24-month objectives and begin to focus on the retention of that employee group today. Because once jobs start opening up, if they're not locked in, they may be looking at other opportunities. I'd say take an opportunity to implement and improve some of the people processes that you've always wanted to do that you didn't have time to do or you didn't think were important to anyone else. Now you have an opportunity to say, this is why this is important. Look at how hard it's been the past 8 weeks. Let's put a process in place that will make this type of change easier in the future. And then the final thing I'd say is uh, recognize and be nimble enough to be part of a lean team. I think things will remain lean in the HR space for some time. I think we know, recruitment slowed down a lot in many organizations, and many recruiters might be searching for that next opportunity. So for you as a professional, stay lean and figure out how you can have the right transferable skills, let's say, that will allow you to kind of cross over and do different type of work to become more valuable to your organization. So those are a few examples.
I love those. Those are great examples. And one of my favorites is, I think, identifying those employees that you said who really are so vital to your business. And I think of it as not only as a practitioner, but as a small business owner. The clearer you are on the people you are serving, and whether you use the 80-20 rule or whatever you want,
Sure.
those people who are really making the most difference for you and your organization, the clearer you are about who they are, how they are helping serve your customer, how they are contributing to whatever your company objectives may be, the easier it is then to focus on the things like engagement and development
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
some of these ancillary programs that you recommend that we spend some time on.
Yeah, if you want to even take that to the next level and looking to be proactive in the performance of the teams in your business, is to do a full top grading activity and use what information you have available if you can't do a new evaluation right now. But understand who your top players are, but also understand who your lower players are. Because although you may not be recruiting for net new hires today, you might not have 10, 15 new recs open, you can take a look at some of the lower performing individuals and say, as we come out of this, how are we prepared? How are we pre-recruiting or building a pipeline of A players to elevate the performance of some of the lower players in the organization? So that's a proactive step to go to your leadership team and to be able to say, we recognize that we've had some low hanging fruit in this team or that team. We'd like to begin to build the recruitment pipeline in order to be ready to hire players now, that especially now that the job market has a lot more people kind of searching for roles.
Yeah. I've been in the past, I've had some experience with some companies that has really blown me away, in the sense that the highest levels of the company leadership, when they sat down to do their succession planning, they knew everybody. I guess my thought when I first entered the workforce was that, okay, you're going to know some people, you're going to know the people doing well, but by and large, you're going to be kind of fuzzy about who a lot of
Yeah.
the team members are, the specific qualifications and skills they bring to the conversation. And then I would sit in this room with these high level business leaders that knew everybody and said, well, David does this really well and he's growing in this area. And actually, he's talked about wanting to move across the country. So what opportunities do we
Yeah.
have there? Really knowing your team members, the people you're serving, I'd got to imagine that's got to be such an advantage if you're trying to think proactively.
Absolutely. And being in those conversations, you have to raise your hand. If you're not already in those conversations, you have to raise your hand and show why it's valuable for you to be in that. And it could simply be, we recognize that those conversations are having. We want to make sure we can support you with recruiting or career succession planning or career pathing. But to get it secondhand, it's a lot harder to make an impact.
Yes. I want to come back to that. I'll give you a second to put your thoughts together on, we talk quite often in HR. I'm talking with people who say, I know I can have more of a voice than I have. I know I can participate in a strategic conversation that I'm not. I know my leadership can value me and my contributions as an HR professional more than they do. I want to earn this or have a seat at the table. And I think part of this conversation and being proactive and strategic in how we're thinking about the future of our organizations and our own careers is, like you said, raising your hand and kind of demanding that seat, but not just because you deserve it or you're owed it in any way, but that you can contribute and demonstrate true value to the organization. I want to come back to that in a minute.
Right.
In the meantime, I want to share, hopefully you'll get to see this, the results. Are you seeing that, David? The results of
Yeah,
our
I
poll?
am. Yep.
Right. So this is a great group, as I would expect of Harmony Insights lunch date audiences, that you're working for an organization that by and large does a fantastic job, or there's some room for improvement, which, we said most of us probably are. And then we don't have anybody that responded that they're reacting to the fires of the day, or that they themselves are their HR professional. So I think that's a good sign, probably, that
Sure.
organizations really are trying to do right by their stakeholders. So coming back to that conversation then, or that point that we were making previously, and we only have a few minutes left, if you can believe it. Um, what do the people who are on the call who are saying, I want to be proactive, I want to be strategic, but I am not yet part of this discussion internally? Do you
Mhm.
have thoughts on one or two things that people can do to raise their hand and become a part of the conversation?
Yeah, I think I have two recommendations that I learned the hard way by not doing until it was a little later, and then realizing, oh, if I had done this, this would have worked out well for me. One is what I kind of mentioned earlier, is to really know your business and know. I think a lot of value comes out of the people organization when the work that you do is directly connected to the business objective. So know every aspect of your business, know what the goals are of each team, not the personal goals, but the team goals of each functional group within your organization. Over the, if it's a 6 month or 12 month or 18 month, whatever you can gain information on, really understand that business, because that allows the conversations for you to have both one-on-one as well as in group settings, and maybe in kind of that more strategic setting. It allows you to connect the work that you and your team are doing directly to the outcomes of the business, which will fairly quickly have them inviting you back. One or two comments in your first meeting where you're there and they're not sure if you're going to contribute at all. One or two things of ways the work you do connects to the business objectives, they'll have you coming back for more. So that's one. The second one is and this is where I don't think I was good at this earlier in my career, is looking outside of the four walls of your business, is recognizing from an HR perspective, recognizing that all of the best practices may not come within the four walls or just within here of your business. Understand who else is out there to help support you. Where does information come from? Where can you get information to say, hey, here's a similar business that had a similar challenge and here's how they tackled it. Bring that to the table versus spitballing or just saying, oh, let's give this a try because we did that 8 years ago and it
Yeah.
produced some results. So look at outside of the four walls. And just to kind of hit it, you mind me hitting a few valuable resources that I think would be
Yeah, let's
good for
do
the
it. And
team
then we
right now?
have to,
Just
we'll close
perfect
up after
timing.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So one, let me be a resource to you, everyone. If you follow me on LinkedIn, if you don't already, David Loiselle. I'm constantly posting information about kind of best practices on how to be a proactive leader. But also, I would say really be connected to industry leaders and trusted partners. So industry leaders, specific to your business, follow their blogs or their LinkedIn posts, read articles, read books, all that. But also trusted partners, insurance brokers, law firms that you work with, recruitment firms. They're hearing, especially right now, what's happening out there, what other companies are doing to get through this crisis and how they can start leading their teams out of this. So listen to them because they can provide that. And then there's a lot of just great resource sites. Two I'd recommend if you're not already connected to them. They'll send you email updates. HR Knowledge Cloud, super great white papers on all sorts of topics, and they keep it relevant to today. And then the HR Resource Trade Pub are both really, really good resources. Sometimes they can be a little bit, they'll throw you products to try to buy based on a certain topic, but you can whittle down to some really great solutions. So I'd recommend those.
That's so helpful. And just so everyone knows, David is going to send those links to those to me that I can forward on to you via email. I have everyone's
Yep.
addresses who attended this conversation, and I can follow up via email with links to those resources and additional ways to get in touch with David Loiselle from LoHigh Talent Consulting. How can people find you easiest other than on LinkedIn?
So LinkedIn, super easy, but you can send me an email if you want to just chat at lohighconsulting@gmail.com.
LoHigh Consulting and that's LoHigh.
GH, correct.
Wonderful. All right, David, this has been fantastic. If other people have enjoyed this conversation, if you would register for additional Harmony Insights lunch dates, I have a couple lined up for next week, one tomorrow and then a few next week that I'm really excited about. I just added one called my HR Hangout, which is bringing people together in a structured conversation, talking about our challenges, our successes, some upcoming events and resources that we'd like to share with each other so that we can go back into the HR work that we're doing more equipped and inspired to do it with excellence, and other topics as the days and weeks roll on. David, it's been a thrill to have you